Good morning from Impact Mental Health. We are without Jo today. Jo has lost her computer to the mending man, so I'm solo today, joined by a guest I'm going to introduce you to in a minute. But first of all, don't forget to purchase our book, Hate Myself, Hate My Life, a teenage guide to finding self-confidence and inner love. Today, the topic is parenting and trauma. I am personally so delighted to invite on board Ursula Elisara. Ursula is co-founder and CEO of Immerse, a foster care agency established to create a transformed and transformational culture of foster care across New Zealand. A survivor of her own trauma, qualified in delivering trauma-informed interventions, Ursula is also a wife, a mother of 4 children, and has fostered over 45 children herself. Wow, Ursula, super mum, welcome on board.
Yeah, hardly, but thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, I love your humility. For most people listening, they will think, gosh, I'm struggling to raise 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of my own children. How have you managed to foster so many children? I would put you on a pedestal personally. I think that is absolutely remarkable. So take my hat off to you.
Well, thank you.
Let's go back on the journey a bit and travel in time. Where did that journey begin? And can you just tell us a little bit more about the story in which you got involved in foster care?
Yeah, so it's pretty an easy one for me. I was, for some reason, born with a real heart for orphans, and I don't know where that comes from. And when I say that, it was not limited to human orphans. I had hand raised a baby possum from 2 inches tall to full grown at 12. Fed baby lambs on the farm across the road, etc., etc. So I loved. It was just quite a strong, I guess, nurture side of my nature, and felt like I could be the answer in those spaces for whatever reason. And so but I always thought then that would go on to traveling overseas, probably, and living in Africa and working in an orphanage. That was sort of when I was late teens. That was the kind of pathway if you wanted to work in, I guess, an orphanage space. There were lots, obviously, all over the world at that time. The Northern Europe as well, and South America, and but then got pregnant very easily with my first child after I was married, and of course that was lovely. And then after she was born, we decided I obviously wasn't going to live in an orphanage then, and so we decided to do an intercountry adoption application. So after she was born, we did an intercountry adoption application, and then got pregnant with my second child. So that put that on hold. And then by the time we moved countries, went to Australia for a year to work and came back here and started another business here. And then by the time that had all happened, I was pregnant with my third, and we became overnight foster parents for our whānau placement. And I put the kiddies to bed, the 3, my nieces and nephews. I'd had a long relationship with the older 2, but didn't really know the youngest one at all due to mental health issues in that family, and he'd been kept quite isolated from us all. And putting all 3 of them to bed that night, thinking, I'm home. Like, this is what I was always born to do. So that was the beginning. And then they went to, our third child was born with quite a severe physical disability. So we had to navigate that for a couple of years, spent the next couple of years in Starship Hospital, working through learning to care for him. And then when he was about 3, we went back into non-kin care. And so we've just carried on doing non-kin care since then. So it's been a journey from 2007.
Long journey. So what strikes me is, as parents, we go through our journeys of highs and lows, and we go through moments where we feel as though we can't cope. What do you think were your coping strategies? How did you manage those really tough times when you had so much on your plate?
Yeah, it's a good question, and probably not one that I've stopped to really unpack. I'm in the right place. Would you like to help me unpack it?
Well, I think
I think I had, because of my own early childhood experiences and my own early traumas, I guess I had developed quite a high resilience factor already from quite young, I think. And I know that we all go through different things, and we don't really have a choice about how our body and brain process things that happen to us. It's more, I think, a little bit about the luck of having, who's around you when that happens, who helps you to unpack those things, and also your own intelligence or your own natural intelligence around how you process those things. So I guess I feel, compared to some of my other family members or siblings, I was quite blessed in the way that I journeyed that. And so I feel like with my kiddies in care or raising my own children, I had been quite intentional about gathering as much information about all the things I didn't know. Like, I didn't know how to not have a marriage that ended in divorce, because my husband and I both came from divorce and, infidelity and lots of violence. And so I had to learn those things, but I purposely started learning those things, I think, really young, and looking for, okay, what are the clues? What are the people that have got some wisdom around these things much further down the track than myself? So I guess I've always been a learner. Maybe that's been a really big help for me. So I still now try to read a book a week, or an audio book a week, and I just take from it what I want, and I just discard the rest. And I think you can never stop adding to your kitty around everything. So yeah, I've just read even another couple of books recently that I've gone, oh yeah, that's a really good point. I'll take that on board and kind of evolve myself again to that. So I think I've just always had quite a high resilience, and I think that came from doing hard stuff but having the right chemistry and environment to process some of that.
I love your sense of integrity and humility also in acknowledging that your journey's been hard, but trying to find the strength along the way in different aspects of your life. And obviously learning's been really important to you. I think when it comes back to dealing with trauma is very much about being unsafe, and life is about survival. And if we're unsafe, we're not surviving, are we? And I think there must be many experiences you've seen with children where they've come from situations and environments where they too, like in your childhood, were very unsafe. What is the role of providing safety for children in that healing process and the journey that they go on?
Yeah, I kind of, again, did a lot of it out of intuition in the early days, and wrote the first edition of my book really just based on that intuition. But when we came across trust-based relational intervention, the kind of therapeutic framework that we scaffold Immerse around, it was really helpful because it gave me the language and the science of what I couldn't really explain from intuition. And so felt safety, which is what you're talking about, felt safety is literally the concrete foundation block on which we can only go on a healing journey from. So when we're not on that solid base of felt safety, and children are not on that solid base of felt safety, everything else you try to add is adding to a scrambled internal sense of self, and generally trying to speak to a fight, flight, freeze brain that can't switch off is really pointless. You might as well try to teach the refrigerator to cook or something. So that felt safety is the only way that we can access our prefrontal cortex and our neocortex around our higher functioning. So one of the ways, there's lots of ways that we provide felt safety, and we teach foster parents to provide felt safety. Predictability, routine, tone of voice, making behaviour okay, because a lot of times our kiddies are terrified, and even our traumatized adults are terrified of their own behaviour, but they can't stop it. And so making behaviour okay and not trying to talk into that while it's happening, safely hold them through that, and then do the reflection piece later. When you felt like that, what was going on for you? How did, what triggered you? What was, help me to understand and help you to understand, so that next time we could do things to maybe prevent that. Lots of reassurance. Also, though, I have discovered in my many years and leading this, a lot of parents and foster parents in this space, is children thrive in the shadow of an alpha. This is one of the felt safety, is when I've had to be the answer to my own problem, but actually I'm too small or too broken or too confused, etc., or too frightened to really know what that answer is. That's an even more terrifying place to be. But when children find an alpha person who gives off, I'm in charge, I've got this, my job is to care for you, because we think of alpha, sometimes as a sort of dominating presence or a bossy, but a true alpha. And this comes from Gordon Neufield's work. He wrote the book Hold On to Your Kids, and he's does a lot of attachment work. The true alpha is that I am the answer. I'm the provider. I'm your answer. I'm your provider, and you can now rest. And so it's a bit, our children in care particularly are laser focused on who's really strong enough in this relationship. And so they need to find that person or that family or those people who know intrinsically that they are the answer and that they're big enough for both of them. And then the child can go into psychological rest. So it's a physical felt safety, but most importantly, that has to transfer to a psychological sense of felt safety.
I love it. I love that explanation, because I think there's so many listeners. I mean, when we think about trauma could be a child at home that's been bullied at school. It could be a major trauma, as you're talking about in foster care, where a child's been abused. But for people listening that might be dealing with unrecognised trauma, which is behaviours manifesting such as anger, rage, tantrums, withdrawal, which is the fight or flight response. I think it's really important to understand exactly what you say, and some of those strategies parents can implement in the home, because parenting is tough. And what comes to mind is, when we ourselves are in a frightening situation, for example, we're going to the dentist to have a tooth removed, we're going to have an operation in hospital, we're in the unknown. And I imagine lots of children that come to you are in a very unknown situation, that even safety might be in being violated, because they know every day they're going to be hit or abused. There's kind of some stability in that, because it's repetitive. You go to a new family that's safe, and it might be unsafe just because it's kind and caring. But when we go to hospital and have those experiences, what we want to do is be under the surgeon that says, you're in safe hands, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have an anaesthetic. There'll be a nurse by your side. When you wake up, there'll be somebody with you. You might feel a bit giddy, but this is the procedure. And automatically feel safe. You know the process. You know that somebody is in charge, and you can just let go. Whereas when you don't know what's happening, the fear then is overwhelming. And that's when the fight, flight, freeze response comes in, isn't it? When it's just overwhelming.
Yeah, great analogy. I'm going to borrow that.
I haven't done a book.
I'm going to borrow that. That's brilliant. Yeah.
But it is about when we feel unsafe, and can we relate to the child's experience? It might be, something's happened to them that we just don't relate to. We kind of think, well, that's a minor something. I don't understand what you're making a fuss about. But to that child, it's a very real experience. So with trauma and children in the situations you face, I imagine you don't need to actually understand what the child has faced, but you can understand the fear, because you've had fear in your own life at some stage.
Well, the details are not really important. And as you've said, small trauma, big trauma, it's all about how that's been processed by the individual. Yeah. And a lot of our kiddies, not in my, not in the system that I work in, have huge, traumas that are real for them, even in relatively good families. And to some degree, little t traumas are what, when we've got a safe adult helping us unpack that is how we build our resilience. We do have to go through situations in our development and in our life that are not pleasant and do create some level of trauma, but it's the having the right people around young people to not be focused on the behavior they're seeing, but dig a little bit deeper and say, hang on, what's going on with you, what's really going on, and then be that answer for them. I think one of the things that I really, I'm a fight, so that's a pretty obvious kind of response when you're really really upset. But some of the freeze response and the flight responses are harder to see. And so with our kiddies, as you said, one of the flight responses can actually be changing the subject all the time. So that's a key. Or whinging and whining can be a freeze type response. So it's looking for those more subtle clues that our children are not coping as well perhaps as we think they are, but then just gently digging a little bit deeper and then being their answer while they're little. What can we do about that? That's not, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's not okay. It happens to a lot of people. It happened to me. If it's a true story, you can, normalize some things, whether we're talking about bullying or being left out of friend groups, or just feeling, you've got a wonderful book, just feeling not okay about who you are and how you fit in the world, and kind of normalizing some of that stuff and helping unpack that with our young people is really key. So it's not that we want to protect them from everything possible that can go bad for them, but we really want them to have a lot of little t traumas and get over them, because when they're adults, when tough stuff happens, they're going to be able to go, I've got a whole backpack full of things that I overcame that I didn't think I was going to overcome. And so I know, even though this could look like a tsunami wave to somebody else, I'm confident that I can ride it out. And so that's the kind of balance, I think.
Some really helpful tips in there. When I lived in England, so moving to New Zealand 10 years ago, we fostered 3 children. So we brought 3 children into the fold when I had 4 I think they were under 11. And actually I found it really difficult and also really easy. The easy was in the sense, because I know there's listeners thinking, could I foster? I've always wanted to foster. I always thought, what a lovely thing to do. The easy was the sense that I already had children. I already had the structure. I was always doing the daily routine of the washing and the cooking. So to feed an extra 3 children when I was feeding 4 didn't make much difference. To do the washing didn't make any difference. To walk them to school didn't make any difference. To do the bedtime routine didn't make any difference. You're bringing them into the structure that's already there. So if you've got children already, and you've got that structure and foundation, you're not having to do a lot extra. But what was tough, I think, for me was emotionally balancing 2 sets of needs. So were my children okay over here, because I brought some extra children into the fold, and then separately was I meeting the needs of the foster children who had very intense needs in terms of needing one-on-one and care and love, and the 5 love languages, and what were their love languages. For you, how do you manage those 2 separate sides and yet integrate a family?
Yeah, that's always again a really good reflection that I might borrow in the future as well, because that is exactly how I have felt. I've always found it. It doesn't, you're already cooking for 4. What's another 2 or 3, etc. You're already doing all of those other, family normal kind of jobs. But I wouldn't say that. That I've always done that really well. I think the reality is you're just one person, or you're just one couple. And I think the first thing for us is just being really mindful that is a need. You have to meet your own birth children's needs and you need to be present and meet these children's, you know, extra needs. And over the, you know, I don't know what it is now, I've lost count, but definitely well over 45 kiddies. There's been three times where we've had to say, you know what, the needs of these children are beyond being able to be spread between myself and my husband and meet the needs of our own children. I remember once my daughter was doing NCEA level 1 and she said, I just feel like I live in a preschool. But she's the oldest, and so there was still a lot of, you know, younger, and then we had extra youngers. She was like, I'm trying to study in a preschool. And I was like, yeah, that would be quite hard to study in a preschool. So yeah, it's just around, I think you just have to be really mindful all the time, and that adds another layer of work to your work. You know, you've just got to be so mindful, and also be brave enough to when it's not going to work.
And what I'm hearing from you is that there is no set formula. There's no rigid pattern. And actually a lot of things that we do as parents, whether we're fostering or not, don't work, and it's trial and error. I say to my teenage parents, you've never parented teens before. They've never been a teen before. So actually it's trial and error, and we're all doing the best we can. And I think, you know, I come back always to parenting is really tough. And what I also hear from you is that you are on a learning journey, and you evolve and you change things, and you read lots of books and you pick up on things and think, well, I'll draw that in and use that next time. And that's such wise word for parents that, you know, who are transitioning from babies to toddlers, or primary school age children to teens, then into the young adult stage, is that it's constantly evolving and changing, and so are we, and we're not going to get it right. How do we deal with a sense of guilt, though, where we feel we failed as a parent? That's a big one.
Yeah, it's huge. Any kind of guilt, I guess, comes with a level of grief, you know, so it's allowing that grief process to run its course, whatever that is. Neufeld talks a lot about finding our tears of futility, and how the tears of futility are the tears that we have when we reach an inevitable thing that we can't change. And it's important for us to find those tears, because they're healing tears. And then once we process through that, we can then get on to the what can we do about it? You know, what are our options now then, if that's we've let that futility run its course, and now, but if we've still got breath in our lungs and, you know, shoes on our feet, we can pick ourselves up and go and say, okay, well, I'm going to do better. And I think that's the only thing we can do, is keep thinking, well, I can take the lesson from that, and all I can do is try and do better. And that might be filling, you know, your backpack with new things, or you know, new learnings, or getting into a supportive group, a support group, or what is it that you need to pick yourself back up and keep going. I mean, there's no point in beating ourselves up over the things we can't change. We're probably better just to have some tears of futility about it, and then strap on our shoes and keep going.
Which comes back again and again to resilience, which you've mentioned several times. And that's again what we want for our children. We don't want to protect them from everything. We want them to have that voice in their head, as we want in our own head. Gosh, I've done it before. I've been to a really dark place before, and I did get through it. I found when I was lonely, people did surround me and hold me in it. It takes a village to raise a child. And actually sometimes to even say, I need help, I'm actually going to humble myself and ask for help. And sometimes when we step outside our comfort zone and make ourselves vulnerable and ask for help, we're blown away, because when we feel so weak and incompetent and even lonely, we can actually lean on the support and the strength of other people, can't we?
Yeah.
For listeners on board who are saying, gosh, I hadn't thought about fostering, or actually I have thought about it, or gosh, we're at a stage now we possibly could and we couldn't before, how can they make contact with you? And what would you say to people that are interested in starting to maybe not immediately say I want to foster, but unravel what it might look like? Do you offer training programs for people that are interested, or how does it work?
Yeah, so you just go to our website, which is Immerse immerse.org.nz. And there is regular unpacking fostering sessions that we run, which unpack fostering. And coming along to one of those evenings and hearing about what it looks like on the inside, and then asking as many questions as you like is probably the best avenue. The landscape of care, as we were talking about before the show, has changed dramatically with the political changes that have been going on of late. And so the level of trauma that our kiddies that we work with now in our service is very high. And so it's really a very highly resilient, robust, experienced parent, or somebody that's had a career that's required that of them, i.e., youth justice or police forces or nursing or teaching, or things where you've been exposed, to a wide range of young people, is really the homes that we would need the most. Gone are the days when we would have, 7 or 8 referrals a day, and half of them would be quite low needs. Most of our referrals now are very high needs.
So as we talk about political changes, what has caused that shift then from just the number of children coming in every day with low needs to these intense complex needs?
Then the massive reduction. Oh, sorry, that's really unhelpful. That's my daughter's class.
Yeah, it shows we're all real.
Yeah. That's to my daughter's schooling. She goes online at 10:30, but not on my computer today, so that's okay. What was the question? Political climate.
Because you were saying that you used to have children coming into care with minor needs, and now it's turned into children with much more complex needs.
Yeah, that's just the reduction in uplifting children from their whānau, and really the ministry working super, super, super hard to find placements within the wider whānau hapu iwi, and placing much more importance on that over sort of straight into non-kin care. So not all of it's bad, but I guess I have some concerns around the screening and vetting and support offered to those whānau who step into the space, blind, I suppose.
The intensity of needs.
Yeah. And so a lot of referrals, we get the odd uplifting still now, but definitely not babies and young ones, and ones that are easier to find placements within the much wider whānau system, which I support fully. Just we do deal a lot with, so outside of our agency, we actually have a contract with the ministry that we train and support their foster carers. So we've trained over 220, I think, oranga tamariki families in the last 3 years. So we work in that space, which is 50% whānau. Yeah. So we are working at upskilling those whānau, and that's a really rewarding space to be in, but it does also highlight the need for training and support to be in place, preferably right from the get-go, because so many of them have tears around, if only we knew this 2 years ago. And then you think, and they have their own tears of guilt around, we've probably done more damage than good, in the sense of we've carried on parenting in the traditional parenting style, which doesn't work for our kiddies who are highly traumatized. So yeah, that's my thoughts.
I know one other area of need you have is mum and baby homes, and I worked for 5 years with mums that had babies uplifted from birth, and I was fought and argued for the case of keeping mums together with babies but supporting the mum rather than separating them, because the long-term trauma on both is so huge, it's almost damage you cannot ever heal and mend. So keep mum and baby together. And so therefore, can you tell us a bit more about those homes and what you're looking for?
That's our favourite. So we call that service Encourage. And we have a one mum and baby home that we started in July last year. So it's our baby's over 1 now. So she was newborn at the time, which was a big risk. But again, like you, believing that the power of attachment, if we create the environment for it to really foster, then we have a mother who is intrinsically and biologically driven to make better choices. You know, when you have your own baby, that sense of lioness or that protective factor that comes into play that you can't really explain to people unless they've, had this experience, is such a powerful force that we are, as mothers, we're designed to die for our children. We would think about that. We wouldn't take long to make that decision. And so it's using that powerful force of attachment and giving exactly the support to mum so that and fostering that attachment so that over time she will make better and better choices. What's unique about our program, and what we're looking for more homes like this, is there's no pass or fail. So long as our mum, and we expect failure, we expect falling off the wagon, we expect drug and alcohol dependency not to magically disappear overnight. These are entrenched things, coping mechanisms that our highly traumatized mothers have gone to as their way of coping with their trauma. And so it's really the home that we've had this last year, an incredible couple who actually have younger children themselves. They weren't empty nesters, or they are in their late 30s, early 40s, and you've got a couple of young kiddies, but have had to overcome the loss by death of one of their own children. So they're highly resilient people, and beautiful. So they just created this incredible environment where mum's been okay to be where she's at, and using that power of baby being right there and needing mum to step up. And mum has just naturally leaned into that. And then, of course, wrapping around the supports of drug and alcohol rehab, and making sure she can get to all her meetings, and taking baby so she can breastfeed while she's popping in and out of her meetings. And I mean, it was, when I look back, I think it was almost crazy, but we had one of our key practitioners spend 3 nights a week where she would pick mum and baby up at about 4 o'clock. They would go to like a 3-hour CAD session, and she would stay with mum and take Bubba out and play, and or put her to sleep or whatever. And then when she would need breastfeeding, mum would pop out and feed, and then go back into her meeting. And now we're looking at 14 months later, and mum is enrolled at university, and she is studying addiction and support, for other mums, I guess, is where her heart is. And yeah, I mean, I can't even begin to tell you the backstory of it all, but it's an absolute 180. There were not many people that thought this would work. But a lot of other programs, as soon as you slip up, as soon as you go on a bender or whatever, you're out of the program and they take your child. Whereas we're like, oh, no, we almost welcome. That's because it's not until you mess up and you find yourself caught and held and loved through that you really get transformation. If we're living a life of ticking boxes and trying to be right and do right, we actually aren't really genuinely evolving. And so what's been amazing about this home is they've been able to do that. And it really didn't take many times, maybe twice, that mum was caught really well.
That's amazing. Yeah. Amazing. I just love that story. I think it's so inspiring for us, because the message in it for me is that if somebody is off alcohol, they can be loved and supported, but the minute they go back onto alcohol, we don't love you, we don't care for you, and you're out the door. What does that say about the whole person? I'm not loved. Whereas actually, if you can say, I mean, the crisis really there is, and the transformational happens, as you say, because she's gone back onto the alcohol, because you're back on our alcohol. We still care. We're still going to hold you. We've still got your back. We're going to stand alongside you. And that message to you, I've got shivers going through me right now, because that's the empowering transformation, is it? No matter how much I cock up, no matter what mistakes I made, I am still loved, and somebody will still stand alongside me. And for, I imagine, her own healing journey of her trauma, what she's been through, that is the transformational place, isn't it? And it's unconditional love. It's somebody that cares enough about you no matter what you do, say, don't do, don't say.
Yeah, and I can absolutely, I mean, she said this herself, Mum has said this herself, that the service and her home has saved her life. But this beautiful attachment between her and her baby, it's like, it's visibly palpable. And even though she wasn't able to raise her other kiddies in her backstory, she would say things like, well, mind you, she is with her mum now in her home, as a nurse, neurosequential nurse specialist. So she's pretty onto it as far as like, oh look, you know, she's found her feet, she's pulling, you know, or she's found her hands, and you know, and so coaching Mum through this process. And she's like, it's like I've seen this all for the first time, even though she had raised to some ages her other kiddies. It was with total, what TBRI says, doing it through the lens of your own trauma. You can't actually see just the little things that actually really, as mums, we naturally go, oh my goodness, you know, they're sitting, you know, all of the little things that we are like, wow, you know, that was just all through this lens of trauma. So it didn't even, you know, this, like, she's seeing this development of this little one for the first time, but yet it's not the first time. Mm-hmm. So it's been, yeah, really, really lovely. And I think that power of that attachment is so strong now. This wee one has a totally different story as far as her ability to do relationship as an adult. I'm convinced will be quite different to her siblings.
And I see on your website you've got a quote from Karen Purin, who says, you cannot lead a child to a place of healing if you do not know the way yourself. And so I guess, you know, there's such a role for people to educate with theory and knowledge and information and strategies, but you talked earlier about your intuition, and also that sort of relates to lived experience, the power of lived experience in transforming lives. I think we're starting to understand, in terms of psychology or science, or the power of actually walking the walk yourself, and walking through the strategies that work means you're in such a place to empower others. And the fact that she's gone on to train now, I feel so exciting.
That's the final step in true transformation. You know, when we talk about, we use Proctor and Clemente's cycle of change in that program. The final step is when that individual is so empowered by this journey that they can't help but want to help others. And then when that transition happens, you're like, you're well on your way now. Our work is done.
And then it's like magic, isn't it? And then I guess you yourself reap the harvest of the seeds that you've sown into other people's lives. And then on one hand, over here you've got the struggles and the hardships, but over here then you've got this incredible harvest of years of sowing into young people's lives. How old is the well, first of all, how young was the youngest child that you fostered?
Newborn.
Yeah,
straight from hospital.
Amazing. And how old is the eldest child that you've seen through now?
We've had in our care up to 16. Well, actually, if you count one of my kiddies, long-term kiddies in care, she still comes back now at 20. So I don't know, does it ever stop? So yeah, but in placements, yeah, up to 16 years old. I can't think of being placed with one older than that. But then at those days, you would age out of the system on your 17th birthday. So thankfully that's changed to 18, and now there's a pathway for young people to stay in care until they're 25 if they need it. So there's been some great changes in that space.
Well, I know that you've touched the hearts of many that will be listening, and for those people that want to make contact with you or that are interested in finding more about what you offer or how they can get involved, where can they contact you?
Yeah, just again, through the website is the best. There's info at Immerse there. So there's a team of people that answer questions and kind of put you on the right path, or willing to have a phone conversation, etc. In our team. So yeah, the website's definitely the best place to have a good nosy around and see what parts you might be interested in doing more of, and yeah, coming through that way. And unpacking fostering is the space to really unpack it all.
Yeah. And we'll add the link in below the chat as well. But Ursula, what I pick up from you is you also, we haven't really heard much about it, but you have your own story of trauma that you've been through. You are a transformed person that is transforming lives, and you're continuing this journey with many others. And so I would just really like to honour you for the walk that you've walked, because without you doing that, you wouldn't be empowering and changing lives right now. And I know your husband too has a big part to play in that, as do your children. But I just want to thank you and honour you for being faithful to that hard walk, so that we are also impacted as a global community with those children that you fostered and cared for. So I just want to honour you and thank you so much for coming on board today. It's just been such a pleasure to talk to you. I could talk to you for hours, but it's got to come to an end. So
thank you. Thanks, Sue. It's been great.
See you.
You too.